The skeletal system: structure, function, and diseases of the bones and joints. Parts of the skeletal system: bones, which includes the skeleton, joints, cartilages, ligaments, bone to bone, tendon, which is bone to muscle. The skeletal system is divided into two divisions: the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. The axial skeleton includes the skull and spinal column, and the appendicular skeleton includes limbs and girdle. Functions of bones: they support the body, protect soft organs, movement due to attached skeletal muscles, storage of minerals and fats, and blood cell formation. The skeleton has 206 bones. There are two basic types of bone tissue: compact bone and spongy bone. Spongy bone is small needle-like pieces of bone, and there's many open spaces. You can see right here where they're pointing to the spongy bone in this picture, and the compact bone here. Bones are classified by their shape. There's long, short, flat, and irregular. Long bones are longer than they are wide, such as your arms and your leg bones. Short bones are usually square in shape or cube-like. An example of these would be the little bones in your wrists and your ankles. Flat bones are flat and curved, such as your sternum, which is included in your chest and your skull. Irregular bones are odd shapes, such as your vertebrae or your pelvis bones. Classifications of bones on the basis of shape. And this just shows an example of each type of bone. Here it has the long bone, which is the humerus of your arm, which is right here. So you can see that it's longer than it is wide. The short bones, here are the different bones in your wrist. The flat bone, which is your skull. This is the parietal bone of your skull. The irregular bone, which you can see that the vertebrae and the pelvis are irregular shaped. Types of bone cells: there's osteocytes, osteoblasts, and osteoclasts. Osteocytes are mature bone cells. Osteoblasts are bone-forming cells. They build up the bone. Osteoclasts are bone-destroying cells. They break down bone matrix for modeling and release of calcium. Osteoblasts and osteoclasts both take part in bone remodeling. Changes in the human skeleton. In embryos, the skeleton is primarily hyaline cartilage. During development, much of this cartilage is replaced by bone. Cartilage remains in isolated areas, such as the bridge of your nose, parts of your ribs, and in some of your joints. Bone fractures are a break in a bone. There's different types of bone fractures. There's closed or simple fracture, an open or a compound fracture, or a green stick. A closed or simple fracture is a break that does not penetrate the skin. An open or compound fracture is a broken bone that penetrates through the skin. And a green stick fracture frays, and is hard to repair. It breaks like a green twig. Bone fractures are treated by reduction and immobilization. So they realign the bones. The axial skeleton supports and protects organs of the head, neck, and trunk. In the skull, there's the cranium and facial bones, the hyoid bone, which anchors the tongue and muscles, and is associated with swallowing. Vertebral column is the vertebrae in the vertebral disc, and then the bony thorax is the ribs and sternum. The appendicular skeleton includes bones of limbs and bones that anchor them to the axial skeleton. In the appendicular skeleton, there's a pectoral girdle, upper limbs, pelvic girdle, and lower limbs. Articulation is where the joints meet, connect, and are formed. And then this is just a diagram of the different bones that were just mentioned. And then here is a blank skeleton that would be available to study or label. The axial skeleton forms the longitudinal part of the body. It's divided into three parts: the skull, vertebral column, and rib cage. Here's the whole front and back view. The skull has 8 sutured bones in the cranium. There's 13 sutured bones and 1 mandible in the face. The cranium encases the brain, it attaches muscles, and has sinuses. And then there's the bones of the face. The sutures are these lines. You can see the sagittal suture here, and then the different bones that make up the cranium. Paranasal sinuses are hollow portions of bones surrounding the nasal cavity. And then here it labels the different sinuses that are in your face. And then the hyoid bone, the only bone that does not articulate with another bone. It serves as a movable base for the tongue and other muscle attachments. The vertebrae are separated by intervertebral discs made of cartilage. The spine has a normal S curvature, and each vertebrae is given a name according to its location. There are 7 cervical vertebrae, 12 thoracic vertebrae, and 5 lumbar vertebrae. And then at the end of the vertebral column, there's the sacrum and then the coccyx. And here is a labeled version of the diagram. The thoracic cage includes ribs, thoracic vertebrae, sternum, and costal cartilages. True ribs are directly attached to the sternum, which is the first 7 pairs. There are 3 false ribs that are joined to the 7th rib, and 2 pairs of floating ribs. And here is the different diagrams. A joint or articulation is the place where 2 bones come together. Then here's the 3 different joints. There's the immovable, slightly movable, and freely movable. One example of the synovial joint would be your shoulder. And then here are the different types. A hinge joint allows extension and retraction. Ball and socket allows for radial movement in almost any direction. They are found in the hips and shoulders. Gliding can move side to side. Saddle is the type of joint that occurs when touching surfaces of two bones, have both concave and convex regions with the shapes of the two bones complementing one another and allowing a wide range of movement. The only saddle joint that we have in our body is our thumb. Diseases and conditions of the skeletal system. There's arthritis. And then one stage is rheumatoid arthritis. Bursitis. Tendinitis. Carpal tunnel syndrome. Osteoporosis. Scoliosis. Kyphosis. Lordosis. Tuberculosis of the spine, which is also known as Pott's disease. Rickets. Scurvy. Gout. Spina bifida. Sarcoma. Myeloma. Leukemia.